Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Daily Gwei Refuel, where we recap the latest news in the Ethereum ecosystem. I'm your host, Anthony Sassano. It is the 5th of February, 2024. Alright everyone, let's get into it. So not too much to get through today since I did a refuel on Saturday, so a bit light on content here, but I am going to talk a lot about Farcaster today. So that's the back half of today's episode because as you guys know, over the weekend, Farcaster just blew up. And you guys know that I've been talking about Farcaster for quite a while now, so I'm going to go all into that. But to kick things off today, a post that I just came across, I think this was published not too long ago, maybe an hour ago, from Toni here and Vitalik called On Increasing the Block Gas Limit. Now, this is an ETH research post, basically all about introducing the concept of a roll-up centric block size. Now, as I said, this was released an hour ago, so I only had time to briefly go over this, but there is a TLDR at the top that I can kind of speak to. But from my brief look at this, it's basically a bunch of ideas around how to essentially make L1 blocks, I guess, like more favorable to L2s, more favorable to rollups, and in particular make blobs more favorable to rollups over call data, and essentially price out things out of call data that shouldn't be in there. That's my kind of first impression here. But the TLDR that Toni gives at the top is, he says, by increasing the block gas limit and the price of non-zero call data bytes, a smaller and less variable block size can be achieved, making space to add more blobs in the future. So that's alluding to, that's basically, confirming what I was saying about the blobs just before. Increasing the price for non-zero call data reduces the maximum possible block size. At the same time, the block gas limit could be raised to make more space for regular transactions, which further incentivizes the transition to using blobs for data availability, strengthening the multidimensional fee market by reducing competition between call data and blobs, which I guess is exactly the goal here. Like as I've explained before, with blob-style transactions coming with EIP 4844, people are still going to be able to use call data. People being roll-ups or others are still going to be able to use call data. And there is an option for kind of like an arbitrage between call data and blobs, depending on the price. And I guess the goal of this is to basically make it so that people use blobs instead of call data for roll-up, I guess, like related things in order to best utilize Ethereum's available block space. And then finally here, it's Toni says, it slows down state growth, which might be preferable in preparing for the Verkle upgrades. As you guys know, the Verkle upgrades are coming as part of the Verge upgrade, which is probably going to happen next year sometime. And also, I will be covering more of the Verkle stuff as time goes on, because as I've said, it's beginning to heat up a lot. So keep an eye out for that, and I will cover it, as it comes out, basically. But anyway, enough on that topic for now. You can go give this a read. I'll link it in the YouTube description below. But from kind of like my first impressions here, there are a lot of trade-offs to each method. I mean, you can see the pros and cons at the bottom of each kind of method that Vitalik and Toni have come up with here, but really the North Star, the ultimate goal, is to make it so that the blocks are used as efficiently as possible, especially when it comes to the blocks being used by layer 2s and rollups and so on and so forth. And there's a nice little kind of graphic here showing this and showing what it basically could look like. So today we have a gas limit and we have cheap call data, and then you can see here what the kind of blocks look like. And then after EIP 4844, we're now going to have blobs added to this. So you've got the consensus layer, the execution layer, and then blobs. And then with this proposal, it basically wants to add blobs to basically make a multi-dimensional fee market for blobs and call data, and then in the future that we can keep adding more and more blobs to this, and essentially do that same thing where we've got more blobs, we've got multi-dimensional fee markets, so that we can basically compartmentalize the different kind of transaction types. At least that's my understanding of this. But as I said, don't take that like as gospel, because this only came out recently. Highly recommend giving it a read for yourself. But this again falls into the theme of a lot of discussions around the block gas limit on Ethereum, and why we haven't increased it, or should we increase it. But I think that given that Ethereum has a roll-up centric roadmap, it would make sense for the block sizes or the gas limits, or basically the block space of Ethereum layer 1 to be tuned to service layer 2s, but while also sticking to servicing layer 1 users as well. So basically, as I said, compartmentalizing these use cases and separating them out without having to force them all to use the same essentially the same kind of block space here and use the same fee market. Now, in saying that, I do want to kind of talk about a related topic here about layer 1 Ethereum. There's this common belief and popular, I would call it myth, that Ethereum layer 1 has completely given up on scaling. Like, we've completely given up on scaling Ethereum layer 1. That is not true. Ethereum layer 1 is being scaled for layer 2s and rollups and is being kind of it made as efficient and effective for those use cases. But Ethereum Layer 1 itself is also undergoing its own scalability improvements for the Layer 1. The Verge is a big part of this, basically getting vertical trees in, doing statelessness, doing state expiry, so that we could potentially increase the gas limit by, we could go from anywhere from 10 to 100x. It just depends on, I guess, what kind of other parameters are set during these other upgrades, and it's probably not going to happen for a little while, but still, that's one big thing there. The other big thing is eventually enshrining a ZK EVM at layer 1. Now, this is technically not a layer 2, so I see people call like an enshrined ZK EVM a layer 2. From my understanding, it wouldn't technically be considered a layer 2 because it is, for all intents and purposes, part of the layer 1. It becomes part of the core layer 1 protocol spec, so it doesn't sit above the protocol as a layer 2, it sits in the protocol, essentially. So it is not a layer 2, yet it is harnessing that ZK EVM technology, that rollup technology, in order to provide scalability for layer 1 here. Now, that comes with its own trade-offs, as I've discussed before. I'm not like a huge fan of enshrined ZK EVMs as like this silver bullet that people think they are, because if you are part of the core protocol as a ZK EVM, you are basically limited by the core protocol. So that means governance limitations where you can't change. You can't change on your own accord. You have to go through the Ethereum L1 governance process. You're limited to only EVM as well, so you can't just experiment like these other layer 2s can. And you basically have to follow the rules of the layer 1 protocol to a T. You can't change them yourself. You have to go through the governance process to change them if you want to change them there. So there is or are use cases for that, but at the same time, I much prefer the general layer 2 roadmap that we have because it allows for a lot more experimentation than we otherwise would have had there. Now, there's also other upgrades coming to Ethereum layer 1 that add to scalability as well, but those are all on the roadmap. You can go check them out. You can actually check them out at the website, the Ethereum roadmap website that I highlighted the other day. I think I'm actually just trying to bring it up here. I can't remember exactly what the URL is, but it is linked in one of the refuels from earlier. But I'll have to get that link and basically share it when I can. But yeah, that's basically a myth that the layer 1 isn't scaling for the layer 1. It's scaling for both. And it's just that we're prioritizing layer 2s because that really is the long-term sustainable kind of roadmap for Ethereum scalability. Whereas layer 1 is, I don't want to say it's a second-class citizen in that world, but it kind of is in terms of scaling for users, because it's kind of hard to have like the best of all worlds at the same time, because you have to make a decision. Given that the Ethereum layer 1 governance process is so slow, given that we want to be cautious about what changes we make, we can't be making like radical changes to both the layer 1 for layer 1 users and the layer 1 for layer 2 users, because the devs in particular like to kind of separate these things out and not overload the amount of kind of EIPs that are going into an upgrade for a bunch of different reasons. Security and reliability being the top two, of course, but also just like the massive overhead that it puts on all the client teams in order to get these things shipped. And then we end up kind of, I guess, exploding out the scope of an upgrade, and it becomes, there's delays everywhere, and it just becomes kind of a shit fest, for lack of a better term there. So that's why we kind of avoid that, at least from what I can tell. But generally, as I said, it is a myth that layer 1 is not being scaled. And this is actually scaling layer 1, what I've just showed you today in this post here, layer 1 for kind of like layer 1 users. But anyway, you can go check out this post. I'll link it in the YouTube description for you to do so. All right, so a great tweet that I came across from Vance Spencer today, where he said, going to be hard to compete with the Ethereum onboarding funnel. And he has a list of kind of dot points here, where he says, gaming L2s such as Immutable X and Ronin, corporate L2s with Base and WorldCoin, social L2s with Lens and Farcaster, and all of the hundreds of L2s splitting out tokens to acquire users. They will all use ETH as their base currency. And then he continues, on top of this, once restaking hits, Denkun launches, ETFs launch, and ETH BTC hits new all-time highs, the COPE and seed will be immeasurable. So that was quite funny to see that, because there obviously has been a lot of Ethereum and ETH bashing over the last few months for various different reasons. But, we don't worry about that too much on the refuel. We're always kind of keeping the long-term goal in mind, which is scaling Ethereum to the world in the most sustainable manner that we can, while preserving Ethereum's important properties such as decentralization, security, and sustainability. Now, I want to hit on each of these points with kind of some opinions here. So When it comes to gaming overall in crypto, you guys know I've been, I wouldn't say bearish on it, but I've been kind of taking this really long-term view where essentially I want to see more of the crypto native games look less like Ponzi's and more like games. And I think that the leading ecosystem for this right now is immutable. Definitely, they are onboarding the most legit games or the most legit crypto games from what I can see, and not all of them are just like straight up Ponzi's where you're just speculating on things. And of course, that leads to some short-term usage, and it may look like you're getting a lot of usage, but it's just very, very short term. And then, of course, Vance mentions Ronin here, which is part of the Axie Infinity ecosystem. They obviously had like a really big, I guess, fanfare or a lot of hype around it during the bull market, where there was a lot of farming going on, a lot of I guess, like speculation going on farming these particular tokens within Axie Infinity, and that led to a very kind of Ponzi-like curve. And that, I think, has been a very big lesson to everyone building gaming or crypto gaming related things within the ecosystem, in that, like, if you optimize for Ponzi's and optimize for speculation, you're going to get that, but you're going to get that in a very short-term way, and then you're going to lose all of that momentum, and it can be hard to gain that back. In saying that, from what I've seen, the Axie Infinity, Ronin ecosystem, they've been building. They've continued to build. I think they're trying to kind of, definitely get away from all that speculation and Ponzi-esque stuff and just make a good game. I think that's really what people have to be focusing on here. You have to make a good game first, and then you can worry about what crypto stuff you can add to it to make it, to enhance the game essentially. Because if you just start and say, I'm going to make a crypto game, like that's not really defined in my eyes. Like I think, like, if you say you're going to make a crypto game, I think for a lot of people, the first thing that comes into their head is that I'm going to make a Ponzi, right? Because that's what a lot of these things traditionally have been. They haven't really been fun games. They've just been things that you would farm. It's really the same kind of concept as airdrop farming or any other such kind of farming that someone does. And what ends up happening is that it just makes it prettier. It's like NFTs. People said, NFTs were just tokens with pictures attached to them, like ERC20 tokens with pictures attached to them. So if you want to avoid that, if you want to actually optimize for non-speculative stuff, then obviously you have to, with gaming, build a good game first, then add some crypto stuff on top. So the second point Vance comes up with here is saying corporate L2s, such as Base and WorldCoin. I don't know if I'd describe them exactly as corporate L2s. I mean, I get why he calls them this, obviously, because Base is being made by Coinbase, WorldCoin is made by, I don't know, WorldCoin Foundation or something, or some company that there is behind WorldCoin there. But at least in Base's case, the long-term goal is to completely decentralize Base. Now, I know, obviously, Coinbase will still have a very big voice in Base's development for a very long time. It will pretty much always be attached to Coinbase as their thing, even if it is fully decentralized. So I guess from that perspective, it does make sense to call it a corporate L2. But at the same time, I don't think it really matters what you call it. I think it's just semantics, and I think I'm just like being, being a bit pedantic about this here. But the whole point is that they're going to bring on a lot of new users, and Base in particular has actually become the go-to chain for social-related apps. Like Farcaster activity related to the activity on Base is exploding. Like, it's absolutely crazy. There's these frame things going on. There's these kind of native Base, I guess, like meme coins that are kind of like integrated within Farcaster. Now, I'm not going to give an opinion on on whether meme coins are good or bad or what have you, but that stuff is happening definitely on Base here. So they've managed to differentiate themselves from some of these other L2s out there, which is great to see. And of course, WorldCoin has like a very divisive background to it. I know everyone's got an opinion on WorldCoin. I don't know if I've ever given my opinion on it, but I mean, I don't know enough about it to have like an informed opinion, so I'm not going to give an informed opinion. But regardless of what I think or what anyone else thinks, it exists. It's been growing. It is on L2. It is using Optimism's technology here. So yeah, it definitely does count as an onboarding funnel. Now, Vance continues and says, social L2s such as Lens and Farcaster. That's obviously really big at the moment. And as I said, I'm going to talk about Farcaster a little bit later in the episode. But that, again, is something that we haven't traditionally seen within crypto. I know that there was a bit of speculative fanfare around Friendtech a few months ago. And I remember saying on the Refuel that I was impressed with Friendtech, not because of what Friendtech was, but because of the onboarding flow. It just felt simpler than what we had traditionally. And Farcaster has actually gone beyond that and made it even simpler than that. So that's why I was kind of excited about Friendtech at the time. But in terms of the actual platform, I mean, it was based on a bonding curve. It was like basically paid groups. It was very Ponzi-esque. So it lent itself to not being sustainable by doing that. Whereas Farcaster is nothing like that. I mean, there is that activity going on the platform, but Farcaster itself is not built as a pure speculative degen kind of I guess like platform with a I guess bonding curve on it that people can just create paid groups and stuff like that. Like it's definitely built from the ground up to be a crypto native social network without that kind of stuff attached to it. But as I said, I'm going to talk more about that later. And Lens is the same, of course. I think that right now Lens is in a bit of a tough spot because it has kind of lost the narrative war so far to Farcaster, and I think really it just comes down to UI UX. Farcaster has better UI/UX than Lens right now. And that's all it really takes at the end of the day, guys, is that when you can create something that's just really easy to onboard people are more likely and more willing to onboard to it. And then obviously there's a flywheel effect where they see their friends on it and then they onboard to it because of that. And then if the onboarding process is smooth, they're just going to go through it and they're just going to do it. And that's exactly what it is with Farcaster right now. It's just a very smooth onboarding process. And then Vance continues and says all the other L2s spitting out tokens to acquire users, which is kind of another topic that I think divides people, because when you think about it from the perspective of people saying, oh, well, these tokens that these L2s are doing, they take value away from ETH, or they fracture the bid away from ETH because people are buying these tokens instead of ETH. And to that, I say that yes and no, because it depends on your time frame, as usual. Yes, maybe in the short term that happens, but it really depends on how many people actually want to hold those things for the long term. And if they are holding them just because they want to hold it during the bull market and then take profits from those things into ETH to stack more ETH, right? But then you could also make the argument about anything. It doesn't have to be just L2 tokens. You can say, well, people are buying, if for every dollar that goes into such and such token, it means it's not going into this other token. And that's true. But again, it depends on time frames. Like if someone is buying, let's say, some random meme coin, they're speculating on it and they're thinking to themselves, I'm not going to hold this for very long, but hey, I want to speculate on it because I want to stack more ETH. Let's say they buy it and then a week later they sell it for ETH. And how long are they going to hold that ETH for? Well, let's say that it's part of their long-term stack. So now they're holding that ETH for years and years, right? So it all depends on time frames here. Yes, a dollar went into this meme coin that would have gone into ETH. But hey, if that person 10x'd on the meme coin and they managed to take profit, which obviously is not everyone, but let's just say for the sake of this is a smart person and they took profit, that $10 now goes into ETH, right? So it's not as simple as saying that if the money goes into these tokens, it means it's not going into ETH, that's bearish for ETH. It's definitely not that simple. Markets are infinitely more complex than that. So that's just one thing that I've seen kind of talked about a little bit recently. And that flows into what I wanted to talk about next, about Vance's next tweet, sorry, I should say, where he said that he thinks ETH BTC is going to hit new all-time highs. And honestly, guys, I know ETH BTC has been lagging for a little while now, especially because obviously BTC has had the ETF narrative, especially because we haven't really seen much new money come into crypto. It's really just gone into BTC, and then from there, it's kind of flowed down the risk curve a lot more. But I don't see a reason why ETH BTC can't go up only from here into the bull market. Like, we have everything going for us. ETH has so many tailwinds behind it right now as an asset. The Ethereum network has so many tailwinds behind it as an ecosystem and as a network. And just the fact that ETH is just getting increasingly used as money across the entire crypto ecosystem is the bull case for ETH. Like I've always said it, that the number one thing that accrues value to ETH, it's not the fee burn, it's not fee revenue, it's not ETH's use as DeFi collateral, it's not ETH's use in staking. The number one value driver by far to ETH, in my opinion at least, is ETH's use as money and its use as a store of value, which go hand in hand. And if we increase that use through increasing ETH's network effect as an asset across the entire crypto ecosystem and beyond, that is what drives the most amount of value to ETH. And then everything else feeds on top of that. The burn feeds into that. The nice looking fee revenue metrics feed into that. Staking feeds into that. Restaking, it all just feeds on itself. But first and foremost, ETH is a money. ETH is a store of value, and that is where it gets most of its value from. And that is what is going to continue driving most of its value to it. And that is the main reason why I'm bullish on ETH. Until I stop seeing ETH being used as money, until I see that slowing down, there is zero reason for me to even think about being bearish on ETH. And I know it's sacrilege for me to say those words, bearish on ETH, but like, I don't foresee that happening, especially in the face of ETH getting an ETF, especially in the face of all of these L2s popping up that, yes, okay, a lot of them won't succeed, but they're using ETH as money. That reinforces ETH network effect. That basically just keeps it in people's mind that ETH is the money of the crypto ecosystem. It's the money that you want to use, and it's the money that is, and it's the thing that you want to hold as well, because it's valuable and it's going to go up over time. So that's why I think ETH BTC has a pretty clear shot to all-time highs, definitely. And I think the all-time high for ETH BTC is 0.0 1.5 or something, just before the flippening. I'm not going to start saying the flippening or anything like that at this stage because I'll just curse ETH BTC forever. But yeah, I think that you're kidding yourself if you don't think that ETH can go to all-time highs against BTC here. But you know, and I think that Vance is right here. The cope and seed will be immeasurable because not only will you see a lot of coping from the BTC maxis who just, you know, always love to make fun of us, but also a lot of these other communities now that have just been bashing ETH and Ethereum for so long. All of their narratives that they've come up with are just completely breaking away and completely fading away. Like the L2s are onboarding more people and getting more usage than any of these other ecosystems by far, and they're more sustainable as well. You guys know that my North Star is sustainability in this ecosystem, and I don't see anything more sustainable than Ethereum and its L2s. Anyway, moving on from that one. So I came across this tweet today from 0x and Not Gonna Make It, who is most well known for building DeFi Llama. They've put together a nice little tool here called smallrefuel.com. So what this does is it uses permits to do a swap that requires no initial ETH, so you can get your first ETH on various different chains. So for example, if you're on OP mainnet and you have no ETH and you want to get some ETH, you can go on, you want to convert another asset to ETH, say you have OP on there, then you can use this to do that. And what it basically does in the background, it uses what's called an intense-based system, where essentially these off-chain, from my understanding, kind of like market makers, I think this is powered by Paraswap. These off-chain market makers basically fulfill the order and pay the fee for you. So pay the fee in ETH for you and then give you the ETH. Very similar to how it works in CowSwap, I believe. And this is why people are excited about Intense, because it basically allows us to abstract away so much of this stuff. But yeah, I mean, you're still using obviously ETH as money here. You're still acquiring ETH. ETH is still the fee token that gets paid and everything in between. So we're just abstracting away from the end user, which is obviously the number one thing that we should be doing with everything in crypto, is making it as seamless as possible to onboard onto no matter what chain you're on. Whether it's in the Ethereum ecosystem or otherwise, it should be as seamless as possible here. So you can go check that out. I'll link it in the YouTube description below for you to do so. All right, so I got the last 10 or so minutes here that I want to dedicate all to Farcaster, because that's probably all you've been hearing about over the last few days. Now, I want to start by saying that congrats to all of you that basically are early Farcaster adopters, because I know there's been some perks so far on Farcaster that you've been able to kind of claim, whether it be NFTs or some tokens and things like that. And honestly, if Farcaster ever does an airdrop, I'm sure they were going to reward their earliest users, which is really awesome. But, you know, I invited, I think, like 100 plus or hundreds of people when I was sending out those invites to Farcaster early on, and those people went on and became really early users. So kudos to you guys for being early adopters there. But you guys know I've been talking about Farcaster for a very long time, and it's been hard for me to kind of switch over, or at least and I use it more because I'm so used to using Twitter. But now that it's gotten so much attention, it's kind of a massive forcing function for me to continue to use it and to make sure I'm not neglecting it and using it more and more, which is what I've been doing over the last few days especially. And I did mention this last week as well, but it's been a long time coming. I mean, you know, it's funny, I went back and looked at my emails. The first call I had with Dan Romero was on November 2021, and I had an intro to him from Tim Byko at the time. But that's how, I mean, and this was when Farcaster was already built out. It was live in some kind of closed beta. And I think I couldn't use it initially because there was only a Mac client available, and I didn't have a Mac at the time. And then I got a Mac, and I ended up using it there. But essentially, he's been building this for a very long time. So anyone who thinks this is an overnight success, no, it's not an overnight success. Dan has been at this with his team for quite a while now, and they've been improving it all along the way. But it's been quite a while. November 2021 was when I first talked to Dan about this. I don't know exactly when they started developing it. Maybe it was sometime in 2021. But yeah, I mean, it's been like 2 years now or something like that. Like, yeah, a bit over 2 years since the last time I spoke to Dan here about this. Now, you see here that Dan Romero put out a tweet today. Kind of ironic that he put out a tweet about this, but kind of funny, where he said that Warpcast is climbing up the top charts of the social networking category on the App Store. It's now number 38. And it passed WeChat, which is a pretty great achievement here. I think this is going to keep running for a little bit because there is obviously a lot of fanfare around Warpcast right now, which is one of the clients for Farcaster. It's the most popular client for Farcaster, but There are, of course, other clients out there. And I will make a note here that I saw some people kind of getting upset because Warpcast had to disable signups for certain geographical jurisdictions around the world. I know that Asia ended up getting paused for a little while. And that was because Warpcast kept getting overloaded with spam from these jurisdictions. Obviously, people were trying to spin up accounts to do some potential airdrop farming or just kind of jump on a trend or whatever. And people were calling this, censorship. And I'm like, I wouldn't call it censorship. I'd call it, wanting to basically to keep the app online and keep it online for everyone and basically not have it so that it's just constantly offline. But at the same time, the beautiful thing about Farcaster, guys, as you guys know by now, is that there are multiple clients for Farcaster. Farcaster is the protocol, and actually I've got a really nice little architecture diagram here, which I'll link in the YouTube description below. But this is basically how Farcaster works. Farcaster is a protocol, and anyone can build a front end on top of this. You can have Warpcast, there is Supercast, there is Yup, there is a few others out there, but anyone can build their own. And you can also, I don't know if you can do this right now. You probably are able to host the front end locally on your own machine as well. So if you're worried about censorship in any way, shape, or form, that's not going to be an issue on Farcaster because your profile is actually stored on chain. As you can see here, it's stored on Ethereum, on OP mainnet, I should say. And then on to obviously settling down to Ethereum. So you basically take your profile with you wherever you go, whether that be Warpcast or Supercast or whatever else it is, at local kind of clients. There is no way to censor you from Farcaster unless the people running Farcaster nodes are censoring you themselves, which obviously is is a lot. It takes a lot more to do than it would take a front end to censor you. And as I've said before, centralized front ends are not censorship resistant in their very nature because they're centralized, guys. Like, you can't expect censorship resistance from centralized front ends. That's why we have multiple front ends for things. And that's not just applies to Farcaster, it applies to DeFi apps and other things in the crypto ecosystem. That's the whole beauty of this. The back end is decentralized. Front end can be centralized or decentralized. That's the beauty of it, guys. So I just wanted to kind of point that one out there. But you can go check out this architecture diagram, which basically gives you a nice high level about how Farcaster works. I'll link it in the YouTube description below. But I described it as like the perfect marriage between Web 2 infrastructure and Web 3 infrastructure to enable a uniquely kind of crypto native experience without having to have everything on chain. Because that's the goal, guys. Like I've said it before and I'll say it again. Most things in crypto are never going to be on chain. They're going to be off chain. And then what's going to be on chain is basically like a ZK proof or an identity system or your profile. Like most of it's just going to be off chain. And that's okay because it still enables the same kind of use cases, just in a much more efficient and sustainable way here. So yeah, you can go check that one out. But Dan Romero also posted on Farcaster that 1 day ago, so yesterday, was the first time Farcaster hit 10,000 hourly active users, which is very, very cool. So the coolest thing about this is still that I know that there's a fair bit of speculation going on Farcaster right now, but Farcaster itself is a non-speculative app, and people were comparing Farcaster to Friendtech, saying that, oh, is this going to be another flash in the pan where everyone just hypes it up, everyone just gets on there, and then everyone leaves? I strongly believe that's not going to be the case for a few reasons. One, as I said before, Farcaster has been around for a very long time now and has been building this momentum for a very long time. Two, Farcaster is built to be a social network, a crypto-native social network, but it's not built to be one with like a Ponzi bonding curve. It's not built to be one with just speculation at its core. It's built to be basically a Twitter clone plus so many other things, right? Like, calling it a Twitter clone is doing it a disservice. It's got all of the features of Twitter that you would want, or at least like not all of the features, but a lot of the features that you would want, such as sending out, tweets, or they call them casts, of course, recasting, having DMs, finding communities, but then it has bonuses on top of it, like channels, which are really, really cool, like different channels you can kind of have here. They've got the crypto native integrations with things like frames. They've got the fact that you can have your profile stored on chain, and that means you can use other front ends. You're not just locked into the front end that is obviously Twitter. You're locked into their front end. You can't use third-party front ends. A fun fact, you used to be able to do that a while ago, and then they shut that down. Same with Facebook. All these Web 2 apps actually allowed multiple front ends, and they shut them down because they're centralized, guys. Whereas Farcaster is distinctly different here. So I don't think this is a flash in the pan. Yes, I do think some of the hype and speculation will subside, but all in all, I think that Farcaster is the future of crypto social media here. And I'm rooting for Lens as well, but I think Lens needs to fix its UI and UX issues and make onboarding a lot smoother and a lot easier before people are going to want to kind of onboard onto there. But I really do believe that Farcaster is going to be the future here. I do believe that a lot of the most interesting stuff is within crypto is going to be happening on Farcaster. And I also believe that Farcaster can break away from just being crypto. It can break into other communities. And they'll come slowly but surely. But definitely it's pretty much almost 100% crypto, I would say, at this point, which is only natural given that that's the onboarding kind of funnel that they went with. But still great to see just such exponential kind of growth that we've been seeing over the last few days, especially here. Now, final thing I'll say on Farcaster is that I created a new Daily Gwei channel on there. So what you can do is you can go follow this channel with your Farcaster account, and then whenever I post stuff related to the Daily Gwei, I'll just post it there and you'll see it in the Daily Gwei channel, and you can just browse through that. And other people can post to this channel as well. So if you have ideas actually of things that you want me to feature on the Daily Gwei or talk about on the Daily Gwei, or maybe you have questions you want to ask me, this is probably the best place to do it, because not only do other people get to see it, interact with it as well, I can see it in a kind of like nice centralized spot where I can see all your questions and all your suggestions and talk about it on the Refuel here. So definitely go follow that channel. It'll be linked in the YouTube description below. And if you haven't onboarded the Farcaster yet, what are you waiting for, guys? Go ahead and do it. It's very easy. You can do it through Warpcast mainly. I think Warpcast is like the main way to onboard right now. So you just go to warpcast.com. But I believe you can also onboard using some of the others out there. But Warpcast is probably the easiest right now. So you can go do that when you have some time. But I think on that note, that's going to be it for today's episode. So thank you everyone for listening and watching. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. Give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to the newsletter. Join the Discord channel. And I'll catch you all tomorrow. Thanks, everyone.